Commander Sarah Chin pressed her palm against the reinforced glass of the observation deck, watching the dawn light reveal the true scope of their predicament. 3 months had passed since the outbreak began in the coastal cities, and now the Midwest Resistance Coalition found itself as humanity's final organized defense. Below her, the sprawling fortress of New Haven buzzed with activity as engineers reinforced the outer perimeter and scouts prepared for their morning reconnaissance missions. The compound, built within the bones of an abandoned aircraft manufacturing facility, housed nearly 8,000 survivors who had managed to escape the initial chaos that consumed the eastern seaboard. Dr. Marcus Webb approached from behind, his footsteps echoing in the sterile corridor. "The latest satellite feeds are troubling, Commander," he said, handing her a tablet displaying thermal imaging data. "We're detecting massive heat signatures moving westward in coordinated patterns. These aren't random zombie migrations anymore." Sarah studied the screen, noting the distinct formation movements that suggested something far more dangerous than mindless undead wandering. The heat signatures moved in waves, with clear strategic positioning that indicated planning and organization. Lieutenant Rodriguez burst through the security doors, his tactical gear still dusty from the overnight patrol. "Ma'am, we've got incoming survivors from the Chicago perimeter. They're reporting something unprecedented." He paused, catching his breath before continuing. "The zombies are using tools, Commander. They're building siege equipment and organizing into military-style units. The survivors barely escaped what they described as a coordinated assault on their settlement." The implications sent a chill through Sarah's spine. Intelligence reports from other resistance cells had hinted at evolving zombie behavior, but this confirmation changed everything. She turned to address both men, her mind already racing through tactical possibilities. "Dr. Webb, I need you to analyze every piece of data we have on behavioral patterns. Look for leadership structures, communication methods, anything that might explain this evolution. Rodriguez, get those survivors to medical and then bring their leader to the briefing room." As the 2 men departed, Sarah remained at the observation window, studying the defensive positions that had taken months to establish. The outer ring consisted of reinforced concrete barriers topped with razor wire and automated sentry guns. The middle ring featured underground bunkers connected by a network of tunnels that allowed for rapid troop movement. The inner sanctum housed the command center, medical facilities, and living quarters for non-combatants. It had seemed impregnable against mindless undead, but organized zombie forces would require entirely different strategies. The intercom crackled to life with the voice of Technical Sergeant Kim Park from the communications center. "Commander Chin, we're receiving emergency broadcasts from multiple resistance cells. The Denver group went dark 6 hours ago, and we're detecting massive electromagnetic disturbances from their last known position. Portland is requesting immediate evacuation assistance, claiming they're facing siege warfare tactics." Sarah grabbed her tactical jacket and headed toward the command center, where digital displays showed the rapidly deteriorating situation across the continent. Red markers indicated lost settlements, while yellow ones represented locations under assault. The pattern was unmistakable. The zombie forces were systematically dismantling human resistance with military precision. In the center of the room, a massive holographic map displayed real-time intelligence gathered from satellites, drones, and surviving communication networks. Captain Elena Vasquez, the coalition's chief strategist, pointed to converging heat signatures approximately 200 miles east of their position. "They're massing for something big, Commander." Conservative estimates put their numbers at over 50,000, but they're not moving randomly anymore. Someone or something is coordinating these forces. She highlighted several smaller groups that appeared to be conducting reconnaissance missions around human settlements. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on Sarah's shoulders as she absorbed the tactical display. Every decision would determine not just the survival of New Haven, but potentially the fate of organized human resistance. The old playbook was obsolete against an enemy that could think, plan, and adapt. She needed new strategies, innovative weapons, and most importantly, she needed to understand what had transformed scattered zombie hordes into a coordinated military force. A young communications officer approached with urgent news. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission on an old military frequency. It's heavily encrypted, but our systems are picking up what sounds like zombie vocalizations mixed with human speech patterns. The signal is originating from the direction of the main horde." The revelation that zombies might be attempting communication represented either humanity's greatest hope for negotiation or its most terrifying confirmation that the enemy had evolved beyond all previous understanding. Sarah looked around the command center at her officers and specialists, each one representing humanity's accumulated knowledge of warfare, medicine, and survival. The next decisions would determine whether New Haven became humanity's last stand or the launching point for an impossible counteroffensive against an enemy that grew stronger and smarter with each passing day. The encrypted transmission crackled through the command center speakers for the third consecutive hour, its haunting blend of mechanical precision and organic growls sending shivers through even the most battle-hardened officers. Dr. Webb hunched over his workstation, layers of audio analysis software peeling back the signal's complexity like an archaeological dig through sound itself. "Commander, I'm detecting speech patterns that shouldn't exist," he announced, his voice tight with disbelief. "The vocalizations follow military communication protocols, but they're being produced by vocal cords that have undergone significant physiological changes." Sarah leaned over his shoulder, studying the waveform displays that painted an impossible picture. The transmission wasn't random zombie moaning, it was structured, purposeful, and terrifyingly intelligent. "Can you decode the actual message?" she asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. The implications of zombie forces capable of complex communication would fundamentally alter every tactical assumption they'd built their defense upon. Technical Sergeant Park burst into the room, tablet in hand and face pale with urgency. "Ma'am, we've traced the signal's origin. It's coming from the old NORAD facility in Colorado Springs, approximately 400 miles southeast of our position. Long-range reconnaissance shows massive zombie concentrations in that area, but they're organized in formations that mirror human military encampments." She swiped through satellite imagery showing neat rows of makeshift shelters, supply distribution points, and what appeared to be training areas where zombies moved in coordinated drills. Dr. Webb's analysis software chimed with a breakthrough notification. "I've isolated the core message structure," he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "It's a variation of military grid reference systems, but modified for different purposes. They're coordinating supply movements, troop deployments, and territorial acquisitions across a network that spans multiple states." The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. The zombie forces weren't just organized, they were operating as a functioning military hierarchy with logistics and strategic planning capabilities. Captain Vasquez studied the decoded intelligence with growing alarm. If they're using modified military protocols, someone with extensive tactical knowledge is leading them. This isn't evolutionary behavior, it's learned adaptation from human military doctrine. She highlighted specific transmission patterns that showed clear command structure communications, with orders flowing from central authority to subordinate units across vast distances. The implications sent Sarah's mind racing through worst-case scenarios. "Dr. Webb, I need you to focus on identifying the source of this intelligence. Are we dealing with infected military personnel who retain their training, or something more sophisticated?" The question hung heavy in the air as everyone present understood that their survival might depend on understanding their enemy's true nature. A new voice interrupted their analysis as Lieutenant Rodriguez escorted the survivor from Chicago into the command center. Maria Santos, a former CDC researcher, carried herself with the bearing of someone who had witnessed horrors beyond description. "Commander, what I saw in Chicago changes everything we thought we knew about the infection," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The zombies aren't just using tools, they're manufacturing them. I watched them operate crude assembly lines, creating weapons and equipment with a level of coordination that suggests retained muscle memory and problem-solving capabilities." Sarah felt the weight of command pressing down as each new revelation painted a darker picture. "What kind of weapons are we talking about, Dr. Santos?" The answer would determine how quickly they needed to accelerate their defensive preparations and whether their current fortifications would prove adequate against an enemy that could innovate and adapt. Maria pulled up images on her tablet showing crude but effective zombie-manufactured implements. Sharpened metal spears, reinforced clubs, and what appeared to be siege ladders constructed from salvaged materials. But more troubling was their use of coordinated tactics, flanking maneuvers, diversionary attacks, and strategic retreats when facing superior firepower. The photographs showed clear evidence of battlefield intelligence that rivaled human military units. The communications array suddenly erupted with incoming signals from multiple resistance cells across the continent. Vancouver reported zombie forces conducting nighttime reconnaissance missions with what appeared to be night vision capabilities. Atlanta described coordinated attacks where zombie units communicated through a series of distinctive vocal signals that functioned as tactical commands. Each report painted a picture of an enemy that was evolving at an unprecedented rate. Dr. Webb's latest analysis revealed the most disturbing finding yet. Commander, I've identified human speech patterns embedded within the zombie communications. Not just learned behaviors, actual human language structures suggesting that some infected individuals are retaining significant cognitive functions while maintaining the physical characteristics of zombification. The possibility that conscious human minds might be trapped within zombie bodies added a horrifying ethical dimension to their defensive planning. Sarah looked around the command center at her team of experts, each struggling to process intelligence that challenged their fundamental understanding of their enemy. The zombie forces weren't just an infectious plague to be contained, they were becoming a competing civilization with their own military doctrine, manufacturing capabilities, and strategic objectives. The war for humanity's survival had evolved into something far more complex and terrifying than anyone had imagined. The first explosion shook New Haven's foundation at precisely 0347 hours, sending tremors through the reinforced concrete that had everyone scrambling from their bunks. Commander Sarah Chin rushed to the command center as emergency lighting bathed the corridors in crimson shadows, while automated systems began sealing blast doors throughout the facility. "Status report," she demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos of alarms and shouting personnel. Captain Vasquez hunched over the tactical display, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she assessed the damage. "Multiple breaches in the outer perimeter, but something's wrong with the attack pattern. The explosions are too precise, too coordinated. They're not random assaults, they're testing our structural integrity." The display showed blast points that formed a perfect geometric pattern around the facility's foundation, suggesting an understanding of engineering principles that zombies shouldn't possess. Dr. Webb burst through the security doors, his tablet displaying seismic readings that painted a disturbing picture. "Commander, the explosions originated from below ground level. Whatever hit us came from underneath our defensive positions." He pulled up cross-sectional diagrams of the facility's foundation, highlighting areas where the concrete showed stress fractures that followed natural fault lines in the bedrock. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication system from the lower maintenance levels. "Ma'am, you need to see this. We've discovered something that changes everything about our defensive position." His transmission carried an edge of excitement mixed with concern that made Sarah's tactical instincts flare with warning. She grabbed her gear and headed for the maintenance tunnels, bringing Dr. Webb and a security detail with her. The descent into New Haven's basement levels revealed a facility far more extensive than the official blueprints indicated. Hidden behind a maintenance panel that had been blown open by the explosions, Rodriguez led them into a tunnel system that stretched beyond the reach of their flashlights. "The blast opened up this passage, but look at the construction," he said, running his hand along smooth concrete walls that showed decades of age. "This isn't recent excavation, it's been here since the facility was built." Sarah examined the tunnel walls, noting communication cables and ventilation systems that were clearly designed for long-term use. "Dr. Webb, are you detecting any air movement? These tunnels have to connect to something." The implications were staggering. If New Haven had been built on top of an existing underground network, their defensive planning was based on fundamentally flawed assumptions about their position. The tunnel system proved to be a labyrinth of interconnected passages that extended far beyond the facility's perimeter. After 20 minutes of careful exploration, they discovered junction chambers with multiple branching paths, each marked with cryptic symbols that suggested organized usage. "Commander, I'm detecting power signatures from multiple directions," Dr. Webb reported, his instruments showing electrical activity that indicated the tunnels were actively maintained and occupied. A distant sound echoed through the tunnels, voices speaking in hushed tones that carried the cadence of human conversation. Sarah signaled for silence as they approached a junction where emergency lighting revealed a chamber containing sophisticated communication equipment and supply stockpiles. "This is a fully operational command post," she whispered, recognizing military-grade electronics that had been carefully maintained and recently used. The chamber held evidence of extensive coordination between multiple resistance cells. Maps covered the walls showing tunnel networks that connected dozens of settlements across 3 states, with supply routes and communication schedules that indicated a level of organization that rivaled their own. "Someone's been running a parallel resistance network right under our noses," Captain Vasquez observed, studying supply manifests that showed resource sharing between settlements they'd assumed were isolated. A new voice emerged from the shadows as a figure stepped into the light. Colonel James Morrison, formerly of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, had been presumed dead in the initial outbreak. "Commander Chin, we've been waiting for you to discover this network. The explosions were our way of opening communication." His appearance was haggard but determined, carrying the bearing of someone who had been fighting a hidden war for months. Morrison led them deeper into the underground complex, revealing chambers filled with survivors who had been living and working in secret since the outbreak began. We've been coordinating resistance activities across the continent through these tunnels. The network connects 47 active settlements and provides secure transportation routes that the zombie forces haven't discovered. The revelation that dozens of other communities had been operating in coordination challenged everything Sarah thought she knew about their isolation. The underground network represented both opportunity and vulnerability. While it provided unprecedented coordination capabilities and escape routes, it also meant that zombie forces could potentially access their facility through multiple entry points. Colonel Morrison, what's your assessment of security risks? Sarah asked, her tactical mind already calculating the implications of their expanded exposure. Morrison's expression darkened as he led them to a monitoring station that showed concerning intelligence. That's our biggest problem, Commander. We've detected zombie forces beginning to explore tunnel systems near Denver and Portland. They're learning about our network, and if they gain access to these passages, every connected settlement becomes vulnerable to coordinated underground assault. The psychological warfare began at dawn with a voice that sent chills through every member of New Haven's defense force. Through the facility's external communication system, a clear human voice spoke with perfect diction and heartbreaking familiarity. Sarah, this is Captain Michael Torres, your former logistics coordinator. I know you can hear me, and I need you to understand that we're not your enemy anymore. The voice belonged to a man who had died in the Chicago evacuation 3 weeks earlier, yet spoke with intelligence and emotional inflection that defied everything they understood about zombie infection. Commander Sarah Chin gripped the communication console, her knuckles white with tension as she processed the impossible. Captain Torres had been her trusted second-in-command before leading a supply mission that ended in tragedy. Mike, is that really you? She responded, her voice carefully controlled while her mind raced through the tactical implications of this development. I'm still me, Sarah, but I'm also something more now. The infection doesn't destroy consciousness, it transforms it. I can think, remember, feel everything I used to feel, but I understand things differently now. Torres' voice carried a mixture of his old warmth and something else, something that made the hair on Sarah's neck stand up. We don't want to destroy humanity. We want to unite it under a new paradigm of existence. Dr. Webb frantically worked at his monitoring station, analyzing the voice patterns and stress indicators that confirmed their worst fears. Commander, vocal analysis confirms this is genuinely Captain Torres. The speech patterns, inflection, and personal knowledge references all match his psychological profile. The implications were staggering. If infected individuals could retain full cognitive function while gaining zombie physiological advantages, the entire nature of their conflict had changed. The psychological assault intensified as more familiar voices joined the transmission. Lieutenant Amanda Foster, Sergeant David Kim, and Dr. Jennifer Walsh, all personnel they had mourned as casualties, spoke with the same disturbing combination of human intelligence and alien perspective. Each one shared personal memories and inside knowledge that proved their identities while advocating for surrender and voluntary infection. Sarah, you know I would never lie to you. Dr. Walsh's voice carried the authority of someone who had served as New Haven's chief medical officer before her apparent death. The infection eliminates disease, aging, and physical limitations while preserving everything that makes us human. We're not monsters, we're evolution in action. Join us willingly, and the transition will be painless. Captain Vasquez monitored the facility's psychological stress indicators, watching as morale plummeted among personnel who recognized the voices of fallen comrades. Commander, we're seeing panic responses throughout the facility. The civilian population is requesting permission to surrender, and some military personnel are questioning whether we should negotiate. The tactical situation was deteriorating not through physical assault but through emotional manipulation that targeted their deepest fears and losses. Sarah made the difficult decision to cut external communications, but the damage was already spreading through the facility like an infection of doubt. Whispered conversations in corridors questioned whether their defensive position was morally justified if their former colleagues were truly conscious and unharmed. Dr. Webb, I need you to analyze everything we know about infection vectors and consciousness retention. Are we fighting people or monsters? The answer came in the form of a disturbing discovery when security teams reported finding Corporal Janet Harrison in the lower tunnels, exhibiting behavior that defied classification. Harrison had been reported missing during a reconnaissance mission 2 days earlier, but surveillance footage showed her moving through restricted areas with apparent purpose while displaying the physical characteristics of infection. She's accessing computer terminals and reviewing tactical data, Security Chief Martinez reported. But she's also showing physiological signs of zombification, enhanced strength, altered metabolism, and resistance to pain. Dr. Webb's examination of Harrison revealed the horrifying truth about hybrid infection. Commander, she's conscious and aware, but her brain chemistry has been fundamentally altered. She experiences human emotions and memories, but they're filtered through a neural framework that prioritizes collective survival over individual concerns. The medical scans showed brain tissue that had been modified at the cellular level while maintaining cognitive function. The discovery that Harrison had been collecting intelligence about New Haven's defenses raised questions about other potential infiltrators within their ranks. We need to implement immediate psychological screening protocols for all personnel, Sarah ordered, though she knew the tests might not detect individuals who genuinely believed they were helping humanity by sharing information with zombie forces. The ethical implications of fighting an enemy that included conscious former colleagues created divisions within the command structure. Some officers argued for attempting negotiation with infected personnel who retained human consciousness, while others maintained that any cooperation with zombie forces represented a betrayal of their duty to protect uninfected survivors. Commander, we need to decide whether we're fighting a war or participating in genocide, Colonel Morrison stated bluntly, voicing the moral crisis that threatened to tear their resistance apart from within. The psychological warfare had achieved its intended effect. New Haven's defenders now question not just their tactical position but their fundamental understanding of right and wrong in a conflict where the enemy wore familiar faces and spoke with voices of the dead. The breakthrough came at 1400 hours when Drive Webb's experimental sonic disruptor array achieved its first successful field test against a zombie reconnaissance squad. The high-frequency sound waves, calibrated to interfere with the infected neural pathways, caused the approaching hostiles to collapse in apparent agony before retreating in disorganized confusion. Commander, we've found their weakness, Webb announced, his voice trembling with exhaustion and excitement after 72 hours of continuous research. The infection creates hypersensitivity to specific electromagnetic frequencies that we can weaponize. Sarah studied the tactical display showing the sonic weapon's effectiveness radius while her engineering teams prepared rapid deployment protocols. What's the range and power requirements? She asked, knowing that any new weapon system would need to integrate seamlessly with their existing defensive infrastructure. The battle for New Haven had evolved beyond conventional warfare, requiring innovative solutions that could counter an enemy that adapted faster than traditional military doctrine could accommodate. Technical Sergeant Park coordinated the installation of electromagnetic pulse generators throughout the facility's perimeter, devices that Dr. Webb had modified based on his analysis of zombie neural activity. The EMP bursts disrupt their coordination networks without permanently damaging their consciousness, she reported, highlighting the ethical considerations that had become crucial to their tactical planning. We can incapacitate them without causing what might be considered murder of infected human beings. The first large-scale deployment of their new weapons came when zombie forces launched a coordinated assault on the facility's eastern defenses. Captain Vasquez watched through surveillance feeds as waves of infected attackers approached their positions with military precision, only to collapse in writhing masses when the sonic disruptors activated. The effectiveness rate is approximately 85%, she reported, noting that some zombies appeared to have developed resistance to the frequency weapons. But they're adapting faster than we anticipated. Colonel Morrison emerged from the tunnel network with intelligence that changed their tactical calculations entirely. Commander, our underground reconnaissance has identified the zombie command structure. They're using a captured military facility approximately 30 miles east of here, and we've confirmed the presence of at least 12 infected personnel who retain full cognitive function. The revelation that zombie forces had established a proper command center with conscious leadership meant that their new weapons might only provide temporary advantages. The decision to launch an infiltration mission to capture a zombie commander represented New Haven's most dangerous gamble yet. Lieutenant Rodriguez volunteered to lead a small team equipped with the new sonic weapons and electromagnetic shielding that might protect them from zombie detection capabilities. If we can bring back a conscious infected individual for analysis, we might understand how to reverse the process, he argued, though everyone understood the mission's survival odds were minimal. The mission launched under cover of darkness through the tunnel network, with Rodriguez's team carrying experimental equipment that had never been tested in hostile conditions. Dr. Webb provided continuous monitoring through advanced communication systems while Sarah coordinated defensive positions to support their extraction. Remember, we need the target alive and conscious, she emphasized, knowing that the ethical implications of their actions would be scrutinized by every survivor in their facility. 6 hours into the mission, Rodriguez's team successfully infiltrated the zombie command center, discovering a facility that looked disturbingly similar to their own operations. Infected personnel worked at computer terminals, analyzed tactical data, and coordinated supply movements with efficiency that rivaled human military units. "Commander, they've got maps of our entire tunnel network," Rodriguez reported through encrypted channels. "They know about every connected settlement and have been planning simultaneous attacks on multiple targets." The extraction of Commander Patricia Wells, a former Army intelligence officer who had been infected during the Denver evacuation, required the sacrifice of 2 team members who stayed behind to ensure the mission's success. Wells, despite her infected status, cooperated with the extraction team once she understood their scientific objectives. "I want to help you understand what we've become," she told Rodriguez as they made their way back through the tunnels. "The infection isn't evil, it's trying to preserve humanity in a form that can survive what's coming." Back at New Haven, Wells' voluntary cooperation with their research provided unprecedented insights into zombie psychology and physiology. Her conscious participation in medical testing revealed that the infection created a collective consciousness that shared memories and tactical knowledge across the entire zombie network. "We're not individual entities anymore," she explained to Dr. Webb. "We're part of something larger, something that sees threats to human survival that you can't perceive from your limited perspective." The intelligence gathered from Wells revealed that zombie forces were preparing for a coordinated assault on all connected resistance settlements simultaneously. Their new weapons had bought them time, but the enemy was already developing countermeasures that would neutralize their tactical advantages. "Commander, we have perhaps 48 hours before they launch their final offensive," Wells warned. "They're not trying to destroy humanity, they're trying to save it by forcibly evolving it into something that can survive the challenges ahead." The emergency broadcast reached New Haven at 0630 hours, carrying the desperate voice of Commander Rachel Stone from the Pacific Northwest Coalition. "All resistance cells, this is Cascade Base. We're implementing Operation Phoenix. Synchronized counterattack commences in 72 hours. Confirm your participation status immediately." The transmission crackled with interference that suggested zombie forces were actively jamming communication networks, making coordination between settlements increasingly difficult. Sarah stared at the holographic display showing the locations of 47 resistance cells across North America, each represented by pulsing lights that indicated their operational status. Green lights showed active settlements ready for coordination, yellow indicated compromised communication, and red marked locations that had gone dark in the past week. "Captain Vasquez, what's our assessment of participating settlements?" she asked, knowing that the success of any coordinated assault would depend on precise timing and reliable allies. The intelligence gathered from Commander Wells had revealed that zombie forces were preparing their own coordinated offensive, targeting multiple resistance settlements simultaneously to prevent any unified human response. "Based on our analysis, we have confirmed communication with 32 settlements, but 7 of those are reporting infiltration attempts and possible security breaches," Vasquez reported, highlighting the tactical display. "We can't be certain which locations are still under legitimate human control." Dr. Webb approached with disturbing findings from his analysis of recent communication intercepts. "Commander, I've detected transmission patterns that suggest zombie forces are mimicking our communication protocols. They're not just jamming our signals, they're inserting false messages designed to disrupt our coordination efforts." The revelation that their enemy could conduct sophisticated electronic warfare operations added another layer of complexity to their alliance-building efforts. Colonel Morrison emerged from the tunnel network with a team of communication specialists who had been working to establish secure channels with other resistance cells. "We've successfully contacted 17 settlements through the underground network, but the process is revealing troubling intelligence about compromised locations," he reported. "The Las Vegas settlement has been transmitting false operational status reports for the past 5 days. We believe they've been completely infiltrated." The challenge of identifying trustworthy allies became critical when Technical Sergeant Park intercepted a transmission from the Denver area that appeared to be from their former Allied settlement. "Commander, we're receiving standard authentication codes from Denver base, but voice analysis suggests the transmission originates from infected personnel mimicking human communication patterns," she warned. "They're trying to coordinate with us for Operation Phoenix while potentially planning to sabotage our efforts." Sarah faced the impossible decision of trusting settlements that might be compromised while knowing that isolated resistance would mean certain defeat. Dr. Webb, is there a way to verify the authenticity of human consciousness in remote communications? She asked, understanding that their survival might depend on distinguishing between genuine allies and sophisticated infected mimics. The solution came from an unexpected source when Commander Wells volunteered to help identify infected communication sources. I can recognize the collective consciousness patterns in zombie communications, she explained, her infected status providing unique insights into enemy capabilities. But you need to understand that some settlements may be operating under hybrid leadership, humans working voluntarily with infected personnel who retain consciousness. The ethical implications of Wells' revelation created heated debate within New Haven's command structure. Some officers argued that any cooperation with infected forces represented betrayal of their mission to preserve uninfected humanity, while others maintained that conscious infected individuals might be legitimate allies in the fight for survival. Commander, we need to decide whether we're fighting for human consciousness or human biology, Colonel Morrison stated, voicing the philosophical crisis that threatened to divide their forces. The establishment of secure communication networks required implementing new authentication protocols that Wells helped design, based on her understanding of both human and zombie psychology. We can create verification questions that only uninfected human consciousness can answer correctly, she suggested, though she warned that the process would inevitably exclude some legitimate allies who might be operating under hybrid command structures. As the countdown to Operation Phoenix continued, Sarah coordinated with verified resistance cells while making contingency plans for potential betrayal by compromised settlements. The synchronized attack would target zombie command centers and supply networks across the continent, but success would require unprecedented coordination between groups that had been operating independently for months. We get one chance at this, she announced to her command staff. If we fail, zombie forces will have proven that organized human resistance is impossible. The final hours before Operation Phoenix revealed the true scope of their alliance as communication networks buzzed with tactical coordination between settlements separated by thousands of miles. Engineers shared weapon specifications, medical personnel coordinated treatment protocols, and tactical teams synchronized their assault plans. Commander, we're showing confirmed participation from 29 settlements with a combined force of approximately 15,000 personnel, Vasquez reported. But we're also detecting zombie counter-preparation activities that suggest they're aware of our planning. The race against time intensified as both sides prepared for what might be the decisive battle in the war for humanity's future, with the outcome dependent on trust, coordination, and the ability to distinguish between allies and enemies in a conflict where the lines between human and zombie consciousness had become increasingly blurred. Operation Phoenix launched at exactly 0800 hours across 17 time zones, but the coordinated zombie response proved that their enemy had anticipated every aspect of the human strategy. Sarah watched in horror as surveillance feeds from Allied settlements showed zombie forces deploying siege engines constructed from salvaged aircraft parts, their mechanical precision suggesting engineering knowledge that surpassed human capabilities. They're not just defending, Captain Vasquez reported, her voice tight with disbelief. They're implementing counter-siege tactics that mirror our own operational plans. The assault on New Haven began with a phenomenon that defied explanation as thousands of infected birds descended on the facility in coordinated attack formations. Dr. Webb's instruments detected electromagnetic signals directing the aerial assault, proving that zombie forces had weaponized wildlife through the same neural networks that controlled infected humans. Commander, they're using the birds as biological drones, he announced as automated defense systems struggled to target the rapidly moving aerial threats. The infection has created a multi-species collective intelligence. Lieutenant Rodriguez coordinated the evacuation of non-essential personnel through the tunnel network while zombie forces breached the outer perimeter using siege towers that moved with impossible coordination. Ma'am, they're not just attacking random positions, he reported through static-filled communications. They're targeting our structural weak points with surgical precision, as if they have complete architectural knowledge of our facility. The decision to activate New Haven's experimental defense systems came when conventional weapons proved inadequate against the organized assault. Sarah authorized the deployment of underground explosive charges that would collapse entire sections of the facility, sacrificing infrastructure to create defensive barriers. Initiate Protocol 7, she commanded, knowing that the controlled explosions would trap some of their own personnel in isolated sections while potentially stopping the zombie advance. Colonel Morrison's voice echoed through the command center from his position in the tunnel network. Commander, zombie forces are moving through our underground passages in coordinated formations. They've learned the tunnel layouts and are using our own escape routes against us. The revelation that their primary evacuation plan had been compromised forced Sarah to make impossible choices about which personnel to sacrifice and which areas to defend. The breakthrough came when Dr. Webb discovered that Commander Wells' presence in their facility was somehow interfering with zombie coordination networks. Her infected neural pathways are creating static in their collective communications, he explained while explosions shook the building around them. If we can amplify this interference, we might disrupt their attack coordination. The possibility of using their captive zombie commander as a weapon against her own forces presented ethical dilemmas that had no time for careful consideration. Technical Sergeant Park implemented the neural interference amplification system while zombie forces penetrated the facility's inner defenses, their movements now showing signs of confusion and disorganization. "It's working, Commander," she reported as surveillance feeds showed attacking zombies hesitating and stumbling as their coordination networks failed. But the interference is also affecting Commander Wells. We might be destroying her consciousness in the process. The climactic battle for New Haven's command center forced Sarah to confront the ultimate leadership test as zombie forces reached the final defensive barriers. With ammunition running low and structural integrity failing, she made the decision to personally lead a desperate counterattack while her technical teams worked to establish communication with surviving Allied settlements. "All units, this is Commander Chin. We're implementing final protocols. Evacuate all non-essential personnel and prepare for close-quarters defense." The tide of battle shifted when reports arrived from other resistance settlements indicating that Operation Phoenix was achieving success across multiple fronts. The coordinated human assault had disrupted zombie command centers and supply networks, creating confusion in their collective consciousness that amplified the interference generated by Wells' modified neural patterns. "Commander, we're receiving victory reports from Seattle, Phoenix, and Miami," Vasquez announced between explosions. "The synchronized attack is working." Commander Wells, despite the neural interference that was slowly destroying her consciousness, provided crucial tactical intelligence about zombie withdrawal procedures. "They're retreating to regroup," she managed to communicate through increasing mental fragmentation. But this isn't defeat, it's strategic repositioning. They're learning from this battle to prepare for the next phase of their evolution. Her sacrifice to maintain the neural interference had bought New Haven crucial time while potentially saving her former enemies. The aftermath of the assault revealed the devastating cost of their defensive victory. New Haven had lost 30% of its infrastructure and 27 personnel, while the tunnel network had been compromised beyond immediate repair. "We held our position, but we can't sustain another assault like this," Sarah admitted to her remaining command staff as they surveyed the damage. "The enemy has learned everything about our capabilities and will adapt their tactics accordingly." Emergency communications from surviving Allied settlements painted a mixed picture of Operation Phoenix's overall success. While several zombie command centers had been destroyed and their coordination networks disrupted, the collective consciousness had proven remarkably resilient, already beginning to adapt and reorganize around the damage. "Commander, we've won this battle, but the war has fundamentally changed," Colonel Morrison reported. "Both sides now understand that conventional military tactics are obsolete in this conflict." 6 months after Operation Phoenix, Commander Sarah Chin stood in the reconstructed observation deck of New Haven, watching the sunrise illuminate a world that had fundamentally changed in ways no one could have anticipated. The facility below bustled with activity that reflected the new reality of human-zombie coexistence, as infected individuals who retained consciousness worked alongside uninfected personnel in an unprecedented collaboration born from mutual necessity and hard-earned understanding. Dr. Webb approached with his daily intelligence briefing, tablet displaying data that would have seemed impossible before the Great Battle. "Commander, our hybrid research teams have made another breakthrough in neural interface technology. The conscious infected are helping us develop communication protocols that allow real-time coordination between human and zombie consciousness networks." The scientific collaboration between species had accelerated human understanding of consciousness itself while providing zombie collectives with enhanced strategic capabilities. The transformation had begun in the aftermath of Operation Phoenix when surviving zombie forces, their coordination networks severely damaged, had approached resistance settlements under flags of truce. The conscious infected leadership, no longer constrained by the collective's rigid survival protocols, had proposed an alliance based on mutual recognition of each other's right to exist. "We've learned that cooperation serves survival better than conquest," former Commander Wells had explained during the first interspecies diplomatic meeting, her recovered consciousness serving as bridge between two forms of human evolution. Captain Vasquez reviewed the Continental status reports that painted a picture of cautious optimism mixed with ongoing challenges. 31 settlements have established cooperative agreements with local zombie populations, but we're still dealing with rogue elements on both sides who reject the alliance, she reported. Some human groups consider cooperation to be betrayal of their species, while certain zombie collectives view conscious infected as traitors to their evolutionary mission. The new defensive strategies reflected lessons learned from the Siege of New Haven, combining human tactical innovation with zombie collective intelligence to create hybrid military doctrines that neither species could have developed independently. Colonel Morrison coordinated joint training exercises where human soldiers learned to work with zombie reconnaissance units whose enhanced physical capabilities and neural networking provided unprecedented battlefield awareness. The integration is proceeding better than expected, he reported, though his expression carried the weight of someone still adjusting to impossible realities. Technical Sergeant Park monitored the expanded communication networks that now connected human settlements with zombie collectives across the continent. We're detecting increased activity from the Australian zombie networks, she announced, highlighting global positioning displays that showed similar evolutionary developments occurring worldwide. They're requesting communication with our alliance to share technological and tactical innovations. The cooperation model is spreading internationally. The most significant development came from Dr. Webb's research into consciousness preservation technology that allowed voluntary infection with guaranteed retention of human cognitive function. We can now offer individuals the choice of enhanced physical capabilities without sacrificing their mental identity, he explained to Sarah during their weekly strategy meeting. But the ethical implications require careful consideration of informed consent and long-term consequences. Sarah reflected on the personal cost of leadership as she reviewed casualty reports from settlements that had rejected cooperation and faced ongoing conflict with zombie forces. The choice between evolution and extinction had proven more complex than anyone had anticipated, with survival requiring adaptation that challenged fundamental assumptions about human identity. Dr. Webb, what's our assessment of long-term viability for purely human settlements? She asked, knowing the answer might determine policy decisions that would affect future generations. The establishment of the Continental Defense Alliance represented humanity's first successful interspecies military cooperation, combining human strategic thinking with zombie collective coordination to defend against threats that neither group could face alone. Reports from international resistance networks indicated that similar alliances were forming worldwide, suggesting that the human-zombie conflict had evolved into something unprecedented in evolutionary history. Lieutenant Rodriguez returned from a diplomatic mission to the Pacific Coast Alliance with intelligence that reinforced their strategic assessments. Commander, the cooperation model is proving effective across multiple environmental challenges. Joint human-zombie teams are successfully managing resource distribution, infrastructure rebuilding, and defense against hostile wildlife that the infection has affected. The practical benefits of alliance were becoming impossible to ignore, even for traditional human supremacist factions. As Sarah prepared for the evening's Continental Alliance meeting, she considered how leadership had evolved from commanding human resistance to facilitating interspecies cooperation. The skills required for uniting former enemies proved more complex than traditional military doctrine had ever anticipated. We're not just rebuilding civilization, she realized. We're defining what human consciousness means in a world where humanity itself has multiple forms of expression. The final intelligence briefing revealed that zombie collective consciousness had begun developing creative and artistic expression, suggesting that the infection preserved and enhanced rather than destroyed essential human characteristics. Commander, we're receiving what can only be described as poetry from the Eastern collectives, Dr. Webb reported with wonder. They're not just intelligent, they're developing culture. The new dawn illuminated a world where survival had required both species to evolve beyond their original limitations, creating possibilities that neither humans nor zombies could have achieved independently. The war for humanity's future had become a collaboration for consciousness itself, with both forms of human evolution working together to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their transformed world.